All right, let's make a line chart with confidence intervals around a mean. So here we have some data broken up by month. Here's the average. I think this data was customer wait time for these number of transactions for each of these months. And then we also found the standard deviation. All right, so you can see some of these have really small number of transactions, so that will probably kind of go crazy in our data. The first thing, though, is to find out what the margin of error is. So remember, when we build a confidence interval, a confidence interval is just the mean plus or minus some margin of error. The margin of error can be broken up by basically some number times a standard error. And the standard error is just the standard deviation divided by the square root of n, typically if we're dealing with means. And then that some number has to do with the level of confidence you want. And that number is either a t-value, typically if it's a sample, or a z-value, maybe. And those two kind of converge when you have a big number. It's typically going to be around the number 2. But there's a function in Excel that makes this really easy. So let's see. We can just make a new label called margin of error. And then we're going to use this function called confidence.t, which will actually just build us the margin of error, so we don't even need to know any of the math. The alpha is 1 minus our confidence level. So if we want a 95% confidence level, our alpha is 5 or 0.05. Alpha is 0.05. If we want a 99% confidence interval, then it's 0.01. 90% confidence interval, then it's 0.10. So the typical is 95%. So let's put 0.05 for our alpha. Our standard deviation is right there. He wouldn't calculated that for us. And then our n is right there. The size is just the number of transactions right there. It's just the n in our case. So there we go. And we can just copy and paste that down. So we're good. All right, so let's do this. So I'm just going to highlight the first 2 columns of data and say insert line chart. And I'm going to use this one that's got markers on it. And we get something like this. So this data might be appropriate actually to leave it with the lines. I'm going to delete this guy because this is time over time, so that'd be okay. But I'm going to go ahead and just delete those. So I'm going to right-click, say Format Data Series, and I'm going to go to Line and say No Line. All right. So now I just have these dots. These are just the means over time. Right, so it just so happens that this is time, but this doesn't have to be time. This could be like maybe different types of machines or whatever that aren't sort of linear. In this case, it is. So it would have made sense to leave the lines, but that's all right. Well, I'm just going to take the lines off to show you how to do that. All right, so let's click on Close. Now, the final thing to do is to add this margin of error. So let's click on one of these. If you go into Layout and say Error Bars, and then we're going to go all the way down. We have all these different choices. We're going to go all the way down to this More Error Bars options. And it gives us this little table. And you can see it's just going to sort of draw this sort of line up and down with a little cap. That's how we display a confidence interval on a graph. And we're not going to use a fixed value because it changes, right? The margin of error is different for every single time. So we're going to use this custom button and say specify values. What this wants to do is to say, okay, well, how high do you want to go above the mean, but above the dot, and how low do you want to go below? Well, it's the same number. The margin of error is the same on above and below. So that's pretty easy. So we just click on this little box and say, well, it's all these numbers right here. And Excel just knows that the first one is 20.52, the second one is 36, the third one is 10, and on and on. So that's how high the positive above the line is going to go, and then it's exactly the same below. So we just do that twice. Okay. I don't know why this does this, but it sort of blanks it out. It's there. It's kind of goofy, but you can't see it anymore, but it still works. So click on OK. All right, so this is what we got. So this has gone crazy. Let me show you why. It's because we have one margin of error that's like almost 1,000 right here. It's because we have really big standard deviation and only 3 observations. And so we end up with this huge margin of error. So what should we do about that? Well, actually, I thought of a whole bunch of different ways to sort of take care of this. The easiest way I think to do is actually just to change this axis right here. So I'm going to click on this axis. If I double click, right click and say Format Axis, it'll get you this option right here. And we're going to say, well, I want to fix the minimum to 0. In this case, this is customer wait time. It doesn't make any sense to have anything less than negative wait time. Right, so let's just leave it at 0. And then let's just make the maximum, so that already makes it look a lot better. Let's make the maximum. The max by default, because of this huge error bar, is like 1500, but there's nothing up here, right? So let's just say the max is like 400. And let's take a look, see what happens. Close. All right, so that looks a little better. See, what we want to do is be able to actually see the ranges down here for these guys. All right, so that's it. So this, even though it's going off the chart, if I were to take a look at that, I'd be like, oh, okay, so it's the confidence interval is so big that you just can't show it to me because it's you have to be on this chart. And so basically I just know, okay, it's just, there's really no confidence at all in this number. Really, we have absolutely no confidence. That's really the average. It's just gigantic. These other ones, we can say, okay, yeah, we're a little bit more confident in what's going on in these guys, right? Some of these other ones are a little bit bigger. And I also know that if it's this big above, it's also this big below. And I also, since this is an average customer wait time, I'm not worried about anything less than 0. So this helps me sort of understand things a little better. All right, so that's it. That's how we build a confidence interval around a mean for a whole bunch of means using a line chart. All right, that's it.